So that we have a part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is where the fight or flight sort of response is processed. And there's actually been studies that do scans of the brain. And someone that has practiced mindfulness in a consistent and effective way for a period of time, their physical brain actually changes. And the activity in that center that has to do with stress and battling the perceived threats becomes a lot less active and a lot calmer. And other parts of the brain, like our language centers and our creativity centers and our memory centers, become more active. So it's like you almost can't touch a system cognitively or physically that mindfulness doesn't help with. And I'm not trying to paint this as a one-stop cure for everything, but in a lot of ways, it does help balance the scales for a lot of those things that plague us.
Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. This is the Conscious Edge podcast, and I'm Alecia St. Germain, entrepreneur and coach. Along with my friend and wellness advocate, Jonathan Duggar, we're diving into what it means to embody radical self-acceptance while still evolving to lead with compassion and kindness. We're sharing our own experiences and expertise as we unpack imposter syndrome, perfectionism, procrastination, and all the other things that lead to burnout and keep you from experiencing pure joy, business growth, and maximum impact. This is a safe and supportive space to explore what it means to be a human creating wealth and building a business. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm Alecia St. Germain, and I am here with my very longtime friend, Jonathan Duggar, and our resident wellness expert.
Hi, everybody.
So, well, that was only a little weird. And if you have been following us for a while, you know that that's just something that we do, is sometimes we are a little bit strange. Sometimes we judge ourselves for it, and then we catch ourselves judging it ourselves for it. And then that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about today, which is, if you've been following any kind of Instagram trends, there is a trend going around right now talking about how we go about doing things. The theme of it is like, it's very demure. I'm very mindful the way I shut the door to the Uber. So we're going to talk about mindfulness today. And this was something that Jonathan came to me and was like, I really think we need to do a whole episode on mindfulness. It's a buzzword that's out there. Is so much grind in wealth building and business right now. And I think there always has been, but even more so, people have become almost obsessed with hustle culture in some ways. And now that there's this movement against it. So we thought it would be really helpful to really dive into what is mindfulness? How do you use it in your life? What are the benefits of it? And how you can start implementing it right now or going to the next level. So, Jonathan, let's start out with, what is mindfulness?
Awesome. Well, first of all, let me just say that this has become a very active part of my life, but also part of my study, and has been for a while, but has increased significantly through COVID and through some other things going on in my own business and personal life. And sometimes when we have a subject that becomes very pop, whether you want to say pop culture or very commonplace in language, we tend to set it aside as, that's just a trend. Well, first of all, mindfulness as a way of living is a very ancient concept. It has its roots in ancient cultures and ancient practices like Buddhism and Hinduism. But you could really say that if you look at any established culture throughout history, there's been a very strong component of the aspect of living in the moment and staying present. And that's the key element of the sort of state of being of mindfulness, is being aware of ourselves and our bodies and our emotions and our thoughts in any given moment, and not reaching back to the past and not forecasting to the future. And in our current way that we live, we do just the opposite most of the time. I mean, how many of you can think of things and think of times, maybe even just this morning or just in the recent hours, where your brain all of a sudden is kind of on autopilot, where you just sort of zone out or phase out, or you're doing something repetitive that you do all the time? Well, that zoning out is not necessarily a bad thing, and it actually be a way to relax. But when it becomes your default, it's also a time when we become unattentive and disengaged to our bodies, to our conversations, to our behaviors. And that's not good. That leads to places where we have negative thoughts creeping in, bad habits taking over, language creeping into our conversations that's destructive, whether it's to others or to self. So mindfulness is just the opposite of that. And it's the counter to that. And it's the thing that helps balance the scales. So mindfulness is a practice or an ability that we all have. It's there. It's part of our natural wiring. We often override that because of, like Alecia said, we've become this hustle culture and have been for a while, but it definitely has gotten more prevalent simply because we have so many distractors. I saw a study not that long ago that talked about kids in school. And when I was elementary age, back in the dark ages, you could count a list of 10 things that were common distractors for kids. That list is now over 200 things that on a daily, moment-by-moment basis can be considered distractors for elementary age kids. So take that and compound it by however much, and that's us as adults. So mindfulness has become even more relevant and more important in terms of balancing the scales. So you can kind of think of mindfulness as a state of being. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm thinking about how these distractions and what this looks like. And I can remember times in my life, not recently, but where you go on this autopilot, and especially driving, where you have been traveling the same route, doing the same thing, and then you arrive at a certain destination or at a certain point and you're like, I don't remember how I got here.
Yep.
I don't remember the drive happening.
Exactly. Or you end up at a destination you didn't intend to. Has that ever happened to you? Are you past your exit that you take all the time because you're somewhere else?
Well, and I think you and I have had that conversation. We've been on the phone together, and I've had to have my GPS on, because if I don't have my GPS on, I will go, this is embarrassing to admit, but like I will go to a place I normally go to instead of the place I'm intending to go to because I'm not paying attention.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Yep. That's a good example. That's a type of muscle memory or cognitive memory that's reflex. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it's a good indication that you definitely should be incorporating some of these things we're going to be talking about. Actually, there's a whole little thing on incorporating mindfulness into your daily life, and which I'll get into a little bit if we have the time today, but mindful driving is actually one of those things. And I might tell a little story about that too, a little when we dive into this a bit more. Oh, there's that phrase.
So backstory to that is right before we got on, Jonathan was sharing that someone who's a regular listener on our podcast said that we say dive in a lot. So now you are all going to be so acutely aware of us saying that. Hopefully it doesn't distract from the podcast, because we're going to be mindful.
Exactly. No judgment. No judgment. So tracking back to the point I was making is that mindfulness is something that's accessible for all of us. But like any other skill, and there is a skill aspect of this becoming a prevalent part of your life, it takes practice. Now, the other piece of that is that often when there's something that has a practice component, we automatically go to a place of, I just don't have time for that. I can't do another thing. Or because many of you have probably already heard about mindful meditation, which we will talk a little bit about. And the whole concept of meditation for a lot of people seems to be kind of scary. And I don't quite understand that, but I get the component of, I probably can't do that because that's something I have told myself for many, many years. And I'll tell you a little story about that as well. But mindfulness is a practice that can be done in a lot of different ways, we'll discover. And hopefully you will all see that this is something that we can all incorporate. And that yes, it does take practice and it does take some effort, but the attention is definitely worth it. When you get to a place of being able to stay aware and stay in the moment and not let your mind and not have your mind default to a place of going to the past and rehashing trauma or going to the future and worrying about what's to come, it changes everything. It really, really does. So we'll actually talk about some of those benefits as well. But let me ask you this question. So when we're thinking about, okay, this is a podcast for people who have businesses, people who are building wealth, they may have jobs that they go to, but then they're using real estate to accumulate wealth. So, I mean, really that being the theme. How important is mindfulness and why are we talking about this really on a business podcast? Okay. I think that's a very good segue to kind of getting into the benefits of mindfulness. Mm-hmm. So we have very solid evidence from a research base and scientific base that started way back in the 70s that mindfulness and the practice of incorporating mindfulness into daily living changes many key aspects of how we live and how we think. So some examples of those would be distraction, distractibility, and, we've ADD, attention deficit disorder, has also become a buzz area, which you might talk about that more at some point too. But it really has to do with us distracting. And you'll see videos, you'll see information on becoming a better multitasker, how to be a more effective multitasker. First of all, there's no such thing. We come up with all these systems to pretend that we're effectively handling a billion things. And that may be the case that we're able to handle 3 or 4 things and feel like that we're effective enough. But how much more effective can you be when you learn to do one thing at a time effectively, efficiently, and to its maximum capacity? Most of the time, we don't practice that.
I coach a lot on a lot of high achievers who have a lot of irons in the fire, and they can't seem to move anything really forward. And so I can really speak to that distractibility, that when we narrow down the one thing that's most important for them to work on right now, they can finish it in a couple hours, a couple days, a couple weeks, and it's off their plate.
Yep.
And the other projects that felt like they were so dire and they had to also be done at the same time, nothing happened. Like nothing was hurt. Nothing fell through the crack. Nothing that wasn't going to happen already, because they were so spread so thin in so many directions that those things wouldn't have been done anyways.
Yep, exactly.
So that distractibility. So what I'm hearing you say is mindfulness increases productivity and focus.
Correct. And then right along with that, because we can learn to stay focused, stay present, and not judge what we're thinking and how we're thinking about it, it also lowers stress and anxiety. So when we are in that constant mode of battling the chaos, our body stays in a state of fight or flight all the time, whether there is a threat or not. And it affects your sleep. It affects your relationships. It affects every component of your life, health, physical health, and mental health. And a mindful state of being actually balances scales with all of that. So that we have a part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is where the fight or flight sort of response is processed. And there's actually been studies that study do scans of the brain. And someone that has practiced mindfulness in a consistent and effective way for a period of time, their physical brain actually changes. And the activity in that center that has to do with stress and battling the perceived threats becomes a lot less active and a lot calmer. And other parts of the brain, like our language centers and our creativity centers and our memory centers, become more active. So it's like you almost can't touch a system cognitively or physically that mindfulness doesn't help with. And I'm not trying to paint this as a one-stop cure for everything, but in a lot of ways, it does help balance the scales for a lot of those things that plague us.
When I'm hearing you talk about this, so practically, as a culture, we have, to some extent, especially doers, become addicted to the stress, the cortisol, the fight or flight response, because there is a certain amount of hyper focus you get to get stuff done. And you get it, it's almost like if you're a procrastinator and you procrastinate down to the end and then you finally get some moment of clarity where all of a sudden you can get the project done. Maybe you don't sleep well. Maybe you beat on your body to get it done, but you get it to completion. A lot of perfectionists and procrastinators actually produce good work in that last few hours. But what could they have created if they had the time and the clarity sooner, right? So,
and at what expense?
Right, at what expense? So what's interesting is, what's needed, right, is creativity when we're not judging ourselves. We can get the same results with mindfulness and do a lot less damage to our body is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And actually much better results.
Right.
Because what happens when and I like that you brought that whole addiction model up, because we have become a society, and especially there's a component of personality types and people that they're running on a constant dopamine shortage. So they constantly do things to try and get those hits of dopamine. And those things often are very maladaptive, thrill-seeking type behavior, pharmaceuticals, food that's bad for us, your sugar fix or your carb fix or whatever it is. So all those things have become biochemical habits our bodies have created because of this high stress living, because of this push to the end. Mm-hmm. And I'm one of those people. I've always been a put it off to the last minute because I have always had difficulty with focus. Mm-hmm. And, I would have been the kid in school diagnosed with the ADHD or, whatever it was, and probably put on some sort of stimulant. But those are all reactions or responses to biochemical habits that our bodies have created. So mindfulness helps bring a place of balance back biochemically, cognitively, emotionally to all those things. So the other piece that just occurred to me that I didn't bring up yet. So one of the practices that we'll talk about in just a moment of mindfulness is paying attention to specifics and starting from one place where, yes, okay, I stayed focused for 5 minutes and these are the things that I observed. And then getting deeper and deeper with that to where it just becomes commonplace. It's a type of muscle memory, cognitive muscle memory, and you don't even have to think about it. But learning to do that, we have also become a society of dumbing down our sensory experience, whether it's recognizing what's going on with our body, recognizing what's going on with our five senses, because they're so overloaded and overstimulated, and we're trying to pay attention to so many things at once, we lose detail. And there's been specific studies done with productivity and jobs that require a high level of detail, where these people practice a mindful meditation 2 or 3 times a week, and then they still do the same jobs that they've always done and probably do on autopilot to some degree. And one was done in a car manufacturing facility. And all of a sudden, the manufacturing error rate, like, I'm trying to think exactly how this worked. They started out with the people that had to assess what the problems were. Like, they were the quality control people. That's what I'm trying to think of at the end of the manufacturing line. Well, so they started the meditation part with those folks first. And their list went from 10 things they would find to 200 things they would find. So they became much more attentive to detail and specifics, and things that really were things that a consumer would pick up on. So they're like, okay, holy crap, how do we resolve this? So they started mindfulness training with the people that were actually doing the manufacturing, like the person that installed the dashboard or the person that installed the leather seats or whatever it was. And all of those errors, all of those misjudgments, the majority of them went away after a very short amount of time. It was something like 6 weeks. Don't quote me on the specifics. This is a study I read years ago, but the point is that it increased effectiveness, efficiency, productivity on a grand scale in a way that nobody expected. And it all had to do with paying attention to detail, which is just one component of the practice of mindfulness. So that's, I hope, a good example of how something that may on the surface seem like a small thing can have
massive
much
effects.
bigger impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so I think about, and I think part of the reason I brought up that the addicted to stress piece is because when you start to bring mindfulness into how you do things, there's this messy middle where you're used to moving at a fast pace and being a doer and like on autopilot, not getting this done and this done and this done. And now, and I know our episode on overwhelm was probably our most popular episode we've done. Like just so that tells me what's going on in the world. If that's the one that people are reading in the title and going, yes, I'm overwhelmed.
Exactly.
But there's a big component of this in combating overwhelm. And so when you go to doing a task and thinking about, and I do this in my morning, I have a certain routine I go through. It would be very easy to be on autopilot, but especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed or feel it creeping in, not when, but when I feel it creeping in, I'm putting the water container into the distiller. I'm pushing the button to turn it on because twice I've actually started the distiller and run an entire gallon of water onto my wood floors because I never put the carafe underneath the distiller, right?
I've made coffee that way.
Not mindful. But my point is, we were talking about like some anxiety around meditation and mindful meditation. That stillness, it's like you're still buzzing from your cortisol and all that hyped up. So if it feels really uncomfortable to be mindful, one of the things I found worked better for me than sitting still initially was doing the routine things, but being really present with doing it. And so it felt more flow. Like I felt in flow with doing the things because it was like appreciating and taking it through to completion and feeling like I accomplished something and did it. So that was one of the things I thought was interesting in me thinking about the doers, right? And so it's just changing the way that you're doing things.
it's interesting because, and I meant to bring this up in the definition part of mindfulness, but one of the key aspects and one of the ones that we have the most challenge with quite often is the aspect of being judgmental of our thoughts, of our bodies, of our feelings, and anything that's coming through or flowing through, putting judgment on it in some way, or over focus from the standpoint of we get locked up on it. So one of the key aspects of effective mindfulness is being non-judgmental, staying curious and questioning, but doing that in a non-judgmental way. And it's very easy to get into a place of being critical of ourselves and of even just the practice of something because we've put other messaging on top of it. So taking the time, 5 minutes out of every day to practice meditation. Oh, well, I really don't have time for that. What are other people going to think if I have to say, you know what, I'm taking a 5-minute break and this is why? What are other people going to think? Well, those are judgments. Those are things that we've put in place. So if you have
or even if you take the 5-minute break, being judgmental of the fact that it doesn't really feel like you're taking a break, and I am feeling jittery and like this is uncomfortable, and then judging yourself for being uncomfortable that you're not meditating right.
Yeah. And then, or you've tried that 5 times and you're still kind of in that same place. And you're like, I should be able to get this. I can't believe I haven't gotten this yet. The person on that YouTube video got it right away. Why can't I do that?
Or it doesn't work.
Yes. Or it doesn't work. So I would encourage everyone to go back and listen to episode 7, the self-compassion versus self-criticism episode, because we do talk some about mindfulness in there, but the concept of mindful self-compassion, which is this aspect of practicing gentleness with ourselves, but also practicing the non-judgment stance and how to remain curious and ask questions without falling into judgment. And I'm not going to pretend it's challenging. It's challenging to get there. But once you do, it can change so many things. I was just having the conversation yesterday with a good friend and also my real estate agent. We had lunch yesterday and we were talking about this aspect of staying curious. And I've been working on incorporating that into everything. So somebody's being nasty to me in some way. And I actually have a predisposition to a quick temper. I come by it genetically. Mom, when you listen to this, don't fault me for saying that. But a thing that overrides that for me is getting to a place very, very quickly. And hopefully at some point it will become a natural response of curiosity. So somebody yells something derogatory at me and my body wants to get upset in a way that it feels upset. Instead, I'm trying to dial back and say, that seems out of character for this person or for this situation. It seems extreme. I wonder if they had a really bad day. My body's tightening up right now. My chest feels tight. That must be a stepping stone to getting angry for me. You see how I asked that question and stayed curious without putting any judgment on that? Mm-hmm. Well, That's not something I come by naturally. It's something I'm practicing though. And it makes a huge difference. So
if you were to break down, or just to be really clear, the practice of mindfulness, what does that include?
Can we just take 2 minutes and do a little, I'm going to just call it an experiment for everybody? Ooh, that was loud.
I love experiments.
Okay, so this is the practice of awareness, which becomes far-reaching the more you practice it. So what I'm going to encourage everybody to do is wherever you are right now, even in your car, if you can do this when you're sitting still or in a place where you're not, where you can limit your distractors, then that's even better. But if not, it's fine. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is, if you can, close your eyes. If not, try and find a sort of fixed spot to look at. And let's start with working through our five senses. So if your eyes are closed, pay attention to what the back of your eyelids look like.
Please don't close your eyes if you're driving while listening.
Please don't try a caveat. Do not close your eyes if you're driving. If you're driving, look at the license plate of the car closest to you or a road sign that you see coming up. And pay attention to not only what you see, but how you're seeing it. That's a little blurry. That sign is faded. I can see the blood vessels behind my eyeballs. And when I move my eyes right to left, these things happen. So pay attention to some of the specifics. Now go to your sense of smell. Take a breath in, smell your surroundings, see what you smell, but not only how you smell, but how you're smelling. When I take a really deep breath, I smell these things. I feel these things when I do it. Then switch to your hearing. You're hearing the sound of my voice. Is there also background noise? What is that background noise and where is it coming from? Start asking those questions related to your senses. Sense of taste. I might have forgotten to brush my teeth this morning. I still taste coffee in my mouth. Whatever it is. So that sense. Now pay attention to the breath you take in. When you take that breath in, what does it feel like? I have a little heaviness in my sinuses. My lungs feel a little heavy. My lungs feel very clear. So as you work through all your five senses, you are starting the practice of awareness. So my encouragement is do that for 30 seconds to a minute every day or a couple of times a day and go in deeper and deeper and deeper each time. What you're going to start to notice is that your awareness increases on a big level. Now you can carry that over, that type of practice over into everything you do. So when you have dinner tonight, I'm going to encourage you to start practicing mindful eating. And this is something I have to do because I eat way too fast. I eat way too fast. Lots of years in healthcare, gobbling our meals, grew up in a big family where food disappeared quickly, all those things. And my default is to eat way too fast and not even pay attention to what I eat, even though I really love good food, as Alecia can attest to. We both do. So practice one bite at a time, and each bite, pay attention to what you're tasting, what that taste reminds you of, a memory it may bring up, the smells associated with it, the textures, all those things layer upon layer. And you can do that across the board. When you wash the dishes, when you drive your car, when you take a walk, all of those are opportunities to practice attention, processing, recollection, and focus without judgment. And then when those elements of judgment do start to come in, or something reminds you of maybe a past trauma or something negative, be curious about it, but try not to let yourself go to the place where it's pulling you. Pull back to the moment and stay focused on the present. Stay curious and stay with the focus on whatever it is that's flowing through at the time.
So I can see where, and I often talk about how when we have a habit or a pattern in one area of our life, we start to do it in a lot of areas in our life. And usually I'm referring to it in a negative sense, like you believe something to be true. But I can see where this is also true, that doing these tiny things, these tiny habits in your everyday life will have you be more detail oriented, make it easier for you to solve problems, have your heightened sense of awareness, because our brain naturally problem solves. And it'll problem solve in good ways and it'll problem solve in bad ways, like to prevent bad things from happening. So I wanted to bring that up because if you are an impatient person that would find that practice irritating, right? Because you just want to go forward, you want to do it, you probably need it more than anyone.
Yeah. If while we were just doing that, some of you started to almost giggle or you felt your face smiling and you judged yourself for that, it's like,
or you judged us for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why are we doing this stupid thing?
There was in judgment in any y'all, then you probably really need this. Or if you immediately, as soon as we said, okay, we're going to do this little simple meditation, you said, meditation, you probably really need this.
Right. Right. But it ripples, right? So
yes,
it is,
absolutely.
the word is practice. Because I initially asked you just a couple days ago, what is mindfulness? You said, well, hang on. Like, it's really a practice. Because, I mean, I think life is really practice because we're just working to figure it out, get better. None of us really, truly
so
get there.
My bigger definition is mindfulness is a state of being that takes a lot of practice.
I like that. I like that. So we're going to be talking a lot more about mindfulness in future episodes. Jonathan, if you haven't picked up on it by now, he's always going to bring it back to mindfulness and a lot of the things and self-compassion and a lot of things that we both coach on. Even if you didn't call it that, it's what it is.
Exactly.
So we just wanted to give this full episode to it so you could really take a moment, get back into your body, into your present life, get in touch with your thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Why am I doing what I'm doing and not just being on autopilot? And you're going to hear us talk more about this going forward. So would love to hear from all of you. If this landed for you, if this was exactly what you needed today, we welcome you to email us at hello@consciousedge.com and share any thoughts that come up from you. It is so rewarding to hear from you. We love it. It makes our day. So if you can take that moment and do that, it'd be amazing. And so with that being said, we're going to send you off to practice mindfulness for the rest of this week. And we'll be back with you in another episode next week. So sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.